So ladies and gentlemen, it feels so good to frickin' say that Daredevil is back, and this is my recap, review, and breakdown for the first 2 episodes, and I will say that I am so happy to see, I know I've already just said what I said, but I'm so happy to see Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock and Vincent D'Onofrio's Wilson Fisk back in my life. So as you guys can expect, we're going to go throughout the events of the first 2 episodes, how well I feel like they started off this season, getting to just the overall more review aspects, and on that note, I of course would just love to hear your own thoughts on my thoughts as usual, and I would just greatly also appreciate any support on this video for the Marvel content here. So if you feel like sparing a like, thank you very much. But of course, we have to get right into this. And I do feel like these first 2 episodes are a decent foundation for what's to come. They touch base with what's happened in the past, and you know, they set up the present day for the momentum of the story going forward, which of course is to be expected. So I do think that these are absolutely build-up episodes, if you will, but that doesn't mean that plenty didn't already happen, which is, you know, to say our starting point here, we pick up with Karen, Foggy, and Matt leaving the office, and oh man, this is where all hell breaks loose, because, you know, sure, you know, maybe I'm getting a bit ahead of myself there. We get a bit of a montage of Hell's Kitchen with the power trio having a good old chat, and I found it quite interesting that Karen suggested to Matt, like, maybe even getting out of the bar, and he says, well, that would be a distinct violation of the Friends Code, so they're clearly in a place where they kind of probably mess around every now and again, even if they know that it's probably not the best idea. And while Karen had a little try with her game with Matt, speaking of, they're kind of listening in on Foggy's game at the bar. This is when Foggy leaves the bar and takes a call from a client they have called Benny. And all of a sudden, we're dialing into Matt's sensory system, which I really loved how the show just kind of kept incorporating this in the first couple of episodes. I mean, I'm sure they're going to carry on, but I love how the aspect ratio just changes, and he dials in to what Foggy is saying on the phone, that he knows something is wrong, and I just can't wait to see how the future episodes are going to continue to utilize this more and more. And, you know, like, kudos to the creativity, because when conceptualizing something like that, I can't imagine it's an easy thing to do or come up with, like, to put the viewer in the front seat, like, driving seat of Daredevil. So, to me, that felt very comic book. And as many of us all knew, man, like, it's Bullseye. Like, we all saw this coming. Like, Foggy more or less tells Matt that he's moved Benny to his apartment after he was getting threats. So they hear a struggle on the phone, and Matt thinks, well, you know, I gotta go investigate. With Foggy being very Foggy here, admitting that he didn't tell Matt about the threats because, you know, he didn't really, as Foggy puts it, maybe I didn't want to give you an excuse, which is really just such a Foggy thing. Before you know it, Daredevil glides his way up the side of this apartment building. And without sounding too nitpicky here, and I mean, after all, like, this is a review, I do want to remind people, because sometimes people are like, oh, but you can't criticize anything. Yes, I can. This is also a review. We do have to touch on the different feel of Daredevil Born Again compared to Netflix Daredevil. And I will say that I do absolutely agree with how the production does feel different to Netflix. It's 100% not Netflix Daredevil, and it does feel like a Disney Plus show version of it. And surprise, surprise, it's a Disney Plus MCU show. Shocker, right? And that is, I will say candidly here, a bit of a downgrade on certain levels. Not every level, not every facet of Born Again, just on certain levels. However, I can see a silver lining in what they've done differently at the same time. So let me explore this a little bit more. I think the quality there has gone down a slight bit, as I was just saying, just with regards to seeing what people have been saying in advanced reviews, such as there being some noticeable CGI at points on and off throughout this sequence, or just episodes in general with, you know, like an entire character CGI, or this digital double of Daredevil or Bullseye, if you will, in quick moments, or just like, you know, the CGI backdrop to the atmospheric stuff to whatever else. And to my memory, see. When it comes to Netflix Daredevil, don't get me wrong, I would have to like rewatch it again right now, but nothing stands out to me to get to a moment of like, oh yeah, like, yeah, so I see you there, CGI, very blatantly. And sure, I also want to acknowledge not everyone has the same eye for that. Not everyone will be able to tell. Some people may be able to tell, but they might not care. But regardless of that, it is noticeable to me and clearly many other people. We're not just making it up for the sake of it, are we? But that silver lining I was speaking about is that the Daredevil fan inside of me loved the ambition of what the comic book Daredevil ideas here, such as the rooftop traversal from Matt Murdock in this moment. And that's not to say that Netflix's Daredevil didn't do some Daredevil moments like this as well, but not quite as comic booky as this, as what we first got a glimpse of in She-Hulk, if you guys remember. But now we're truly owning the fact that we're in the MCU. So seeing this adaptation of Charlie Cox's Daredevil does result in a much more comic fluent, moving Daredevil with what the show does, and I think that's pretty damn awesome. It's just that it does come with the more, how do I say this, like synthetic Disney Plus backdrop and CG to things, which is a trade-off I can personally deal with, as I do get very giddy with these heroic Daredevil moments. And as we get more into like the 2 episodes and into other scenes that show more of the material of the show, they do it's relieving to know that they show that the plot still has this direction that brings out the good material in these characters. And that's something that I'm 100% tuned into, because, if you had these CGI moments, but then also like a weak narrative and just story arc with other plots going on this season, such as with Fisk being a huge one, White Tiger, that would be like even more of a letdown. But that's not the case, at least from what I've seen of these 2 episodes. And also, I've just heard it gets better and better when it comes to the plot. And I can see that because it is building up more and more. So anyway, back to it. This is when Matt tunes in to Benny talking to Foggy. And he tells him that Bullseye wanted to know where he was. And ladies and gentlemen, the worst kept secret ever. But Foggy gets frickin' sniped. Like, F's in the frickin' chat for Foggy, please. Bullseye drops in and literally says, "Hello, Karen." And, Matt comes in and starts slapping the living crap out of him. But it's a bit too little, too late, unfortunately. And in all reality, the only reason... And this is like so messed up, but I kind of love the villainy of it at the same time. You don't always need a good reason, even if it comes across as a bit one-dimensional to some people. But in all reality, the only reason Bullseye did this, as pointed out later by Matt in the courtroom with his statement, is that Bullseye is a self-styled assassin with a grudge out to murder his perceived enemies. And this is showcased brilliantly, even with that moment on the rooftop. Matt is like screaming, "Why?" to him, and he has no answer. Doesn't say a single word. He just laughs, like psychopathically, even pats him on the shoulder, just like, brilliantly sadistic there, with no other explanation. And it almost just makes you like almost empathically feel the emotions that Matt Murdock is feeling in that moment, with such hatred for this character. But again, before I get too far ahead of myself, I really digged this fight sequence. Some people, I remember when the clip of this came out, were saying that, the choreography is bad and stuff, but I didn't feel like that was the case. What I did observe is what we've kind of been over already, with how you can tell occasionally when a CGI body or digital double was in use, and there was somewhat of a synthetic feeling to the set at times with the atmospheric changes that they were doing. But again, at the same time, I do want to say, while I ID'd those things myself, I still was appreciating it. It's just like, critically, I could see some cracks in it. But when you just take it is for what it is, I still really enjoyed seeing Daredevil versus Bullseye. And another thing, that I really digged is that, just with regards to the choreography and whatnot, is that they still attempted to use a one sequence shot at moments, at least, with what feels like a handheld camera. It kind of really puts you in the moment, and I really dig Matt like just tuning into Karen's voice and seeing how they're doing, and how Charlie Cox came up with that idea, which wasn't originally in it, to have the heartbeat echo throughout the whole scene. So, like, you know, it's not only that pressure, but it's Matt keeping tabs on his friend. That wasn't a part of the original sequence here. So that's amazing. I love all of that, even if it's to the detriment of his battle with Bullseye, because every time he did that, you know, he got another spank around the head with whatever Bullseye would toss at him, as well as like another blade into his suit. When we cut to Foggy dying, though, it is just heart-wrenching. Not to mention there's like multiple innocent people literally dying in the middle of this fight from Bullseye, and the body count ends up being like, what, around 11 people. And with Bullseye, you could just see, and the acting under the mask, just through the eyes, incredible job. He knows he's in trouble, but he's kind of ultimately succeeded in what he wanted to do at this point, so he knew that this was a bit of a kamikaze job, and Matt just unleashes on him. And we hear Foggy's heartbeat getting slower and slower, and he dies. And we just cut to Matt, like, hearing just this utter anguish and screaming. And then we see Bullseye, as I just said, slapping this all up. And again, it's that pat on the shoulder, man, being like, you know, I got you, man. If anything, I got you good. Like, that's the only thing I'm going to show in this moment. And Daredevil can almost even understand it in a sense, like, just how angry, you know, incomprehensibly infuriated that would make you feel. And he just disregards him like a piece of trash off the roof. And he lands, like, face first onto the ground. And lo and behold, dude is alive. Now, at first I was like, really? I mean, I know we have comic book logic in the MCU here, but, you know, then I remembered that Bullseye had that surgery at the end of the Netflix series after Kingpin absolutely shattered his back. And we all knew with that scene that they did back then with the surgery that they were pertaining to the somewhat experimental surgery that he had in the comics, especially with the fact that they showed the bloody Bullseye logo in his eye in that scene. Now, I'm not saying that he had like this adamantium spine, but regardless, that surgery is likely the reason why Bullseye is still breathing in this moment. Now, even though Daredevil didn't kill, he had every intention of doing so. I mean, we literally saw it. So in addition to losing his best friend and, you know, a literal attempted murder, yeah, as Matt said, he very much so crossed a line that is against his values. He went against his no-kill rule, so willy-nilly easy there, and even though this can be seen as a bit of a retread at how he's resisted this before with Kingpin, I do think that this story is, you know, one worth exploring with regards to when you're faced with, or just like a character rather is faced with the fundamental loss of a best friend like that, like a death in the family, so to speak. It can fracture a character to their core, as per Born Again in the title, and, you know, construct an arc and where they rebuild. Now, I would love some opinions on this from other Daredevil fans, because does something like this piss you off as much as a story would, and where, let's say, another character we talk about a lot here on the channel, such as Batman, if he did the same thing? We all know that's such a no-go there with his no-kill rule, but do you find the delve into Daredevil's dark path and road to reconstruction, this hero's journey, an interesting story with, you know, Foggy's death being posed as the justification to tip the character to such a point? I mean, it just kind of works out that he didn't die, but you know what I mean? That's not really the point. The point is he kind of attempted a murder. But another thing about Foggy's death is that I do totally acknowledge people when they say that it comes across a little bit rushed. I'm not saying you have to think that. I'm just saying I acknowledge it with regards to seeing a couple of sides here. I think they wanted to catapult the series off with something explosive in order to just kind of set Matt on the hero's journey arc, and it's emotionally impactful, so it sucks the viewer in. It's like, you know, a thrill ride in those first 10 minutes, especially after seeing a few seasons of this character already. But it does absolutely make me wonder if they should have held that moment off until at least the end of the first episode. And that way, if you think about it this way, we could have had like 45, because these are long episodes, we could have had 45 minutes to reacquaint with Foggy, reacquaint our love for him, get even more attached if you haven't seen him in a while, and for it to maybe hit even harder. Like, maybe that could have interfered with the show's plans and structure and thus the pacing. So I'd love to know your thoughts about that in particular. I'm just not sure. It's something I think I need to sit with for a bit longer. But what I do know, guys, no matter what side of the camp you're on here, because I know some people are proper passionate about the Foggy death thing. I know it's better than what the alternative was. Now, this isn't like a great excuse, but the showrunner did reveal in an interview very recently that the original direction for Daredevil Born Again is that Foggy was dead, and they were going to do that, but they did it off screen. That's why the showrunner was like, you don't do that many seasons of Daredevil, love these characters, to then just do Daredevil Born Again and like, oh yeah, by the way, that character, he just died off screen. That's why he was like, I'm either bringing in Karen and Foggy or I'm not going to accept this job. Like, I understand why he had such passion behind that, because, my God, if it wasn't for that creative overhaul, that would have been absolutely terrible. Oh. So this is when we pick up 1 year later, and I guess the idea of Foggy surviving or it being Karen instead wasn't true, and I don't see how they do a fake out scene after this. I know people are saying, but the showrunner said that both Deborah and Woll and whatnot, like Foggy, are returning for season 2. And it's like, well, I don't know if it's going to be like in a head kind of dreamy sequency thing or like I don't know, but like surely not. But either way, moving on. Now that we're a year later, the state of crime in New York has gotten much worse. Civilians are even being interviewed saying that they need Daredevil back. This ties into the whole BB interview stuff later on. Matt is now working for, and this is, I don't know how to pronounce this because Americans and in the show pronounce it Kirsten, but we would pronounce it Kirsten. Now, I know if I pronounce it Kirsten, I'm going to be corrected. Either way, Matt's now working with a joint new venture, Murdock and McDuffie. And we finally, ladies and gentlemen, cut to Wilson bloody Fisk. And of course, he is fine dining. And I like the camera shot that we got in this moment, like showing him upside down there after seeing, I guess you could say, this normal perspective of Matt, but to flipping upside down to Fisk felt like he was being shown as the real devil here, like delving down to like the pit of Fisk. But either way, to not be too over dramatic here, Vanessa, after the events of the past few years, has definitely stepped up her game. I mean, I know she was portrayed as, like, quite menacing towards the end of the Netflix series, but here, she's been keeping the business alive, and we see her having met with the members of the 5 families, and we see that Fisk arrives himself, and despite Vanessa climbing up the ladder of respect in the criminal underbelly, he just causes this absolute dead air and dread in the room. And that's the kind of gravity I love that they're still giving Fisk in the Disney Plus version. He still feels intimidating to me. I know some people have questioned that, but to me, Vincent D'Onofrio's owning it here, and he's still very much so the Kingpin. But what was also, interesting to see is the strain his recovery put on the relationship he has with Vanessa. I also like how his first line was literally just, Vanessa, because I just couldn't help but laugh because of all the memes over the years. And he talks about how when he was like putting things back together over those months of recovering, what stood out to him was A, his undying love for her, but also what they could do for the city. And it's more or less, long story long here, it's time to become mayor. We all knew this was coming. And Vanessa, in the meantime, has made the business bulletproof, which means he won't really face any questions there. That remains to be seen, but apparently he should be quite airtight, and I get why they had to pad that in because, otherwise you could just poke a hole in his mayoral candid to see if that was something they could easily do, like in earlier seasons, investigating his criminal activities. But you never know, with the whole BB storyline, that might be something in the long term. But you get the sense, either way, that Fisk has been so absent from this side of things that maybe Vanessa could be quite possessive of the power she's, been used to controlling, especially with how she feels estranged from him now, to the point of where they're in bloody therapy in episode 2. Like, their relationship and arc this season, it is for sure something I am intrigued to see develop, as I'm just not exactly sure where it's going to go for now. Like, are they really going to get all lovey-dovey up again? Like, I don't know. Like, Vanessa, she's got a guy on the side. Like, Adam, I think his name was. I don't know. But we then cut to the sentence for Bullseye, and Matt gets to give his statement. So Karen arrives late, and this is where Mr. Poindexter gets convicted of 11 counts of murder. And as we leave the courtroom, we find out that Karen has moved to San Francisco. And when Matt asks to go for a coffee, Karen just doesn't want to do that. But it does turn out that when Foggy died, she felt like she lost Matt as well, because he wouldn't talk to her for weeks, which is like a pretty horrible thing when you think about it. Like, I do get how people go through different grieving, but like when you're like the family unit Karen, Foggy, and Matt, and you just ignore her when she needs you. Like, that, you can imagine how that would cause a big rift. And as, just Matt says in this moment, like, I refuse to believe that a tragedy had to destroy everything. For fans of Matt and Karen in particular, and just the family unit they had with Foggy, and just their dynamic in general, it absolutely sucks to see that this is what things have come to. That's pretty much it now for Karen, for now. Because I think we have 3 episodes of her this season, and as I said, she should be returning next season, so I am looking forward to seeing more from her. But I do see at the same time how the storyline has somewhat naturally pushed her out the way. I was getting a bit worried about, hoping that the show doesn't take the approach of that despite the creative overhaul allowed the inclusion for Foggy and Karen to return, that in reality maybe they included them to address them, but, make the Netflix fans feel seen, only to put them aside again now that we're fully entrenched in the MCU, and just kind of actually end up having a similar result to the original approach. But now that we know she is returning for more episodes, maybe season 2 as well, so ultimately, bottom line takeaway there is I do want to see more of Karen. And later that evening, Matt hears Fisk on TV, and let's just say that this gets his attention. Fisk talks about lawlessness in New York with vigilantes running rampant, which is a main talking point, really, of his announcement for his candidacy for mayor of New York, and I guess what he wants to bring about change with in the city. And Matt just has a whole new battle on his hands now, and there's the whole tagline, Fisk can fix it. But we also get that scene in where Daniel Blake impresses Fisk with his enthusiasm, because he asks him, why would you vote for me? You could just tell that Fisk is kind of taken with him, and it just kind of makes me think that he wants to make him his new Wesley. This is where Kirsten gives Matt a new task, and that's going to meet a potential new client, but it turns out that he meets Dr. Heather Glenn. And they started off on a bit of a wrong foot, but Matt impresses her by telling her that he knows that she's from Queens with the whole A's and O's, but ultimately, yeah, the Riz is rizzing at this point in time. And we just cut to some music, just some music, and they're both enjoying their time together. This is certainly an interesting story setup, especially where things get to in episode 2 with this character. And it's making me wonder, of course, like, where are things going to go? I've got an idea with who she meets, and it could be an F's in the chat situation. I hope it's not the whole typical, oh, I might find out he's a vigilante, and oh, I'm wrapped up in the danger of Fisk and Daredevil. I like her. I just hope it subverts my expectations. Now, as we get to the end of episode 1, this is when Matt Murdock has a little sit down with Kingpin himself, which I truly enjoyed on so many levels. As much as at times it felt like a pissing contest, as they kind of talk about serious stuff, it can just all of a sudden be like, I miss Becky's diner. But overall, I just think that both actors here have such chemistry dripping off of them after just seeing the other seasons. And, on another note there, it's like, yeah, sure, it's not like you have to watch them to enjoy the show, but seeing their history and seeing them here greatly aids in the very presence that this situation is. They both end the conversation with a firm reminder to each other, like, hey, if you step out of line, I'll be here. And Fisk is like, well, if you return to your old ways, or activities rather, as he puts it, there'll be consequences, because I ain't putting up with people running around in my city under my mayoral leadership in silly costumes. The thing is, despite Fisk's brush with death making him want to assert control in a new way, perhaps even slightly deluding himself that he'll run a bit more of a tighter ship, all while being totally shady still, don't get me wrong. I love how, as we get into episode 2, he's already, symbolically here, got bruised and cut up knuckles. Just symbolically showing that these new presentations of the main characters that are being put on, it's only a matter of time before they revert back to who they are. And episode 2 certainly accelerates that trajectory for both Kingpin and Daredevil. Now, I'm not sure how fast the mayoral election is in New York, but it kind of felt like it happened out of nowhere. Or at least I didn't sense a passage of time. And then, the episode just kind of ends off with Fisk celebrating, and you have Vanessa Craftley kind of cheersing in the background. Some weird energy going on there, as I briefly kind of got into earlier. But it was a good end to the episode with what's established. Like Matt walking throughout the city and hearing people talking about Fisk and, reacting to the rise of Fisk. It's like an incredibly formidable opponent, of course. And he's risen to a position in where things could get insanely messy. And then for Matt to also hear people calling out for help and, maybe to just carry on walking, the temptation to go back and be Daredevil is there. And I'd like to think the same thing for Fisk, right? In that last shot, as he's looking over New York, like his city. Is he really just seeing a city that he can help or save? Or is it really the temptation to view it as an empire? That's the thing. That's probably what is really there. But he's probably like, no, I don't view it as an empire. No, I want to... I'm not just shitty, I want to help. No, bro, you view it as an empire. But this is when, ladies and gentlemen, we step into episode 2. But as we launch into episode 2, we're truly at the new kind of status quo now, or status quo, however you bloody want to pronounce it. Fisk addresses New York on New Year's Eve and promises that with the new year, there'll be a new era for New York, with once again Fisk's kind of main selling points being like, hey, people of New York are tough and they know how to look after themselves, and hey, we got some Easter eggs here. I did appreciate that. We don't need a gun-toting vigilante who wears a skull on his chest, Punisher reference, we know we're gonna see him, or a man who dresses in a spider outfit. Hey, I would love to see Peter as well, and that would be kind of mad. But obviously that's not going to happen. And then, of course, obviously a guy who wears devil horns to save them. But the sense in this city is that even though there is some debate, Fisk really does overall have quite a bit of support from the people. We then see Fisk somewhat easing into his mayoral position, having to agree to do appointments, and it's pointed out to him that Vanessa's resistance to being a part of the narrative of his overall, mayoral image is hurting his image with traditional voters, but, he's still adhering to the whole Fisk will fix it when he just waltzes over to that big hole in the road that looks like a superhero landing kind of pothole, and he demands that it gets, filled right away, bypassing whatever permission you'd need to do that. We also get to see some BB Ulrich, or is it Ulrich? I can't remember, interview Fisk, and this gets a bit awkward because she learns that Fisk knew her uncle, or maybe she already knew, and he calls him a good journalist. And he definitely knew him all right, considering he killed him in the past when Karen and Ben were close to exposing Fisk's criminal activities. Now, I'm not sure where things are going to go here entirely with BB, but I'm sure there could be somewhat of a lineup for her following in her uncle's footsteps and nearing the end of Born Again Season 1, maybe perhaps being helpful in exposing more things about Fisk, or perhaps at the very least being a little bit of a thorn in his side. And then up next, this is where we get to see what else is going alongside the main plot this season, and that is, of course, the White Tiger arc. We then cut to White Tiger at the train station, or rather in Hector mode, because he's not, wearing the amulet or the White Tiger suit, and he saves this dude who looks like he's, being mugged, and one of the attackers ends up, tripping over the other guy and getting floored by the train. And it turns out that those two guys were cops. And this really ends him up in a whole pit of trouble because, Matt, while he's at the police station, hears Hector getting beaten up in the interrogation room. And this is when he tells Matt the story. Matt knows that he's telling the truth. And once again, I love how we're getting into the sensory abilities of Daredevil here because he can hear his heartbeat. It's going steady. He's not sweating. But when he asks if there's anything more he could tell him, he knows that there could be more to him because his heartbeat does be a bit faster. Now, Kirsten isn't happy with Matt taking on this, impossible odds case. And I do see how they see it that way because, the cops are saying it was an unprovoked attack. And, there are literally no other witnesses that Hector saved that they've got. So it's just not a great look for the law firm to take what appears to be to the public as well and to other police officers quite a clear-cut black and white case. And thus, it just looks like you're going up against the NYPD for no reason. But Matt asks Cherry to do some more digging on Hector, and so Kirsten and Cherry go to see Hector's wife, encouraging her to go to court because it kind of looks a little bit better to the jury and whatnot, and she says that Hector is not the man that she married. And this is when Cherry finds the White Tiger suit. So it makes me wonder if she says that about her husband, because, well, sure, you know, he's a secret vigilante, so I'm sure, you know, he's not the man you married if he wasn't doing it back then. But I also believe that using that white tiger amulet can cause a bit of an addiction or like withdrawal when you're not using it. So I'm not sure if this is going to get explored, but I did really enjoy hearing them, and this is the thing about it really being in the MCU now. Not that they didn't get into some fantastical stuff in the Netflix series, but they acknowledged the amulet's mystical abilities when, you know, Matt went to confront Hector after Cherry told him about it. So I don't know how much more we're going to get into Hector, but I hope to see more white tigery kind of stuff. But meanwhile, oh god, this is where we revisit Heather Glenn at the book signing of hers, and we have a couple of intriguing things happen here. And I would love your theories, my goodness gracious me, because I feel like I may know where this is going. So, first, we have a certain someone attend her book signing, acting a bit off, you know, he's a bit too fascinated if you ask me, saying that he really needs help when he goes up to get the book signed, and, you know, he's wondering if she's taking any new clients, and I think most of us can tell that this guy is going to turn out to be Muse. In fact, I think this guy was actually cast as Muse, and that's not good. Like, Heather, get away from this man. Do not have a closed-door therapy session with this man. Just don't do it. I think maybe we need to put preemptive Fs in the chat for Heather. I'm not saying I know any... I do not know any spoilers. I haven't seen any screeners. But yeah, I think we know where this is going. And then out of nowhere, one of Fisk's guys gets his book signed. Now, I'm wondering if a couple of things are going on here and how, yes, you know, Vanessa and Fisk are literally both actually attending that therapy, as we see at the end of this episode. But, you know, to choose Matt Murdock's basically girlfriend as a therapist, that must be intentional in the same kind of way that Matt is using Cherry to keep tabs on Fisk, or at least got him to poke into him a little bit. But this way, Fisk gets something useful out of it, but also actually has an intimidating foot in the door of Matt's life. And man, I can't even begin to imagine Matt's reaction if he learns that Fisk is the latest client that she cancelled dinner, you know, for later on, especially with her knowing that Matt isn't a huge fan of Fisk and their paths have crossed before. But speaking of Fisk, ladies and gentlemen, what we saw of him next as he attends that police officer's funeral showcases how he really is just Mayor Kingpin, as once he doesn't get what he wants from the commissioner, especially after being called a whiny kid from him, a monster just trying to rewrite his legacy, a thug is always a thug, his darker half absolutely comes out. So, this is when we see the police commissioner later on arrive to Fisk's office and tell him that he's resigning. And by the way, you know what? You know, so are a lot of cops. Good luck with hiring some more cops. Fisk then resorts to his old ways, telling him about his favorite cheesesteak. And as he's like eating his food and he lifts up his food, like wrapping, a picture is revealed of the police commissioner's wife, I believe, and child. He said that he wanted to keep the child secret, so I don't know if this is an affair, like another lady and his other secret kid. Either way, it's family, right? It's family, and the concept of compromise, as Fisk said, has been on his mind a lot, and he's basically saying, if you don't compromise with me, you know. So, you know, he's not really that much of a changed man if he would have signed off on, like, you know, executing somebody's wife. So I don't know how Adam is getting away with doing sweet nothings with Vanessa, his one and only true love. So yes, it's all BS. But after a chat with Cherry, where he's struggling to find the witness, this spurs Matt on to think, hey, maybe I should just follow the partner to the dead police officer. So Matt listens in on the cops planning to do a hit on that witness. I don't know how they found the witness. Like, Cherry seemed to struggle with it, but they found him. And Matt goes to the witness, and he's too scared to go up against the cops, as, you know, that'd be very bad for him. That's why he didn't come forward. But Matt's like, it's kind of already too late, man. They're racing up the stairs. You need to get out the window, and my friend will look after you, and we'll go from there. And this is where Matt lets the cops in, and, you know, it's like, no matter what happens, destiny will arrive. all the same. The cops throw Mr. Murdock up against the wall, and it exposes, by the way, before I carry on here, a Punisher tattoo. And that really fascinated me, because, I mean, I know we're getting Frank, the Punisher, this season, but as far as that tattoo, it kind of made me wonder if, you know, perhaps it's due to, like, people who believe in the Punisher's justice, but it's not like he's recruited them, it's just that they're inspired by him. And I wonder if this is why Matt goes to Frank, as seen in the trailers, as it's not like Frank would... I mean, I doubt Frank would agree with the way these cops operate, whether they see the Punisher as a symbol they can follow or not. Anyway, though, they start beating the crap out of Matt as we get to the very end of the episode here, and then they just decide to kill him. And he practically begs them not to do this, because it'll bring the devil out, and, well, my God, it does. He completely wrecks them, like, to the point of breaking the elbow back the other way, to the point of where that freaking cubicle tunnel is bursting through the side it absolutely should not be bursting through. Holy crap. And, you know, I did feel, as a bit of a critical brain opinion here, there were too many cuts in this fight. I actually counted there was around 25 in 20 seconds. Now, all while I recognize that this is likely a stylistic choice of execution to go with, to just kind of be like, bap, 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 bap in a fight, it just still kind of makes it hard to take in when you do that, for me, and, well, for some other people. But still, Matt Murdock going ham, can't help but love it. I also loved the symbolism in just how one half of Matt's glasses were cracked. You know, just the darker, cracked half is back. And he just kind of lets out this little "ree" at the end there as the episode cuts off. And as I said, you know, Daredevil's back. Fisk is still Kingpin. Matt, you're still Daredevil. Like, you can't contain the beast. He's here. And yeah, that was literally the 2 episodes. And I'm at this point where I guess, you know, we're coming to the close of the review now, and, you know, you can't blame me. We've been talking a long time here, where I enjoyed myself. I feel like there is a bit of a weird feeling in terms of, no matter what, I think a lot of people out there, now sure, social media isn't real life, but I am seeing things where it's like, oh, this isn't as good as I wanted it to be and stuff like that. I think that, I'm not saying this, like, this invalidates people's criticisms, but quite often what happens is Daredevil's coming back, baby. Expectations get up sky high, mad sky high. And then when you kind of see some cracks, it's like, oh, you deflate right to the floor. I've always had my expectations, or I try to with stuff like this, to be like, hey, I'm glad that Matt Murdock's back, Charlie Cox is back, Donofrio is Kingpin, the story's back, a bit more of the silver linings, as I was going on about earlier. Yet the production quality is noticeable. For me, it's an expectation I had, so I will call it what it is, but in my own subjective enjoyment, it doesn't really take away a huge amount. I still feel like the material that the story has with the story in terms of Kingpin and Matt Murdock and, you know, what's going on with White Tiger and the courtroom scenes that we saw a couple of times and just all of that, you do have material there which is bringing out these characters that we liked and loved, if anything, to see in a Netflix show. But I don't know if it's just my expectations, but Daredevil Born Again, in these first 2 episodes, which we're also setting up what we're hearing apparently gets better and better and better and better, which I hope is the case. I'm not saying this was bad at all. I'm just saying that means people will hopefully enjoy it more and more who are maybe being a bit more critical in these first 2 episodes. I feel like it did a decent job. I don't think it did an amazing job. I felt like I enjoyed myself much more at some points than other points, but there was still like a fluid, you know, like through line for me in terms of enjoyment. So I don't know. I guess I could keep going round in circles there, but I'm invested in seeing what happens with Kingpin. What the heck's going to happen with Vanessa? Is there any kind of out of left field moments that's going to happen? Muse, oh my God. Heather, are you in trouble there? How Frank comes into this. The hero's journey as well, obviously, in the wake of Foggy's death, like Matt going back to Daredevil. Yeah, Daredevil is born again. But, like, what do you guys think? Do you agree with what I said in some of the more critical parts? Did you enjoy the show? Do you have opposite opinions to me on another front? What do you think about the theories that we got into, you know, with, you know, Muse and some other things? Where do you think things are going to go with White Tiger, Frank, all of that good stuff, Fisk? Can't wait to read your comments. Thank you so much if you got to this point of the video. Like, you're a real one if you've stayed this long. That's insane. I know I do quite in-depth rambly breakdowns, but hey, man, I've tried changing. I can't change it, so now I embrace it. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you, fellow devils of Hell's Kitchen, in the next video. Goodbye.